In this technique video, I'm going to show you how to take fine silver wire and coil it around a mandrel, and then you'll cut that coil to make jump rings, and then I'll show you how to fuse those jump rings. So let's take a look at the products and tools we'll need to do this technique. So I just wanted to go over the product and tools we'll need to make our fused rings. So here I have a coil of 14 gauge fine silver wire. 14 gauge is a great place to start if you are new to fusing. Just keep in mind the finer the gauge of wire, the harder it will be to fuse. I have a marker that I'm using for my mandrel. I have some Tronex razor flush cutters. I have some Nylon Jaw Pliers. I have some chain nose pliers. I have my butane torch. I have a canister of butane. I have my pumice fire brick. I have a cooling cup and some tweezers. And then, of course, I have my safety glasses. So I'm going to set my station up to show you how to coil and cut your rings. And so I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm all set up here to coil and cut some rings for fusing. So I'm just going to use a section of the 14 gauge wire and set the rest of it aside. I like to start with a fairly long length because we want to definitely make quite a few coils so that we can cut a few rings at a time. So I'm just taking my wire, and as you can tell, this fine silver, it's very soft, so it's very pliable. So I'm going to take my mandrel, and you want to bring your wire, and you want to hold your tail on there really pretty firmly, but you want to have a little bit of length because as you're coiling your wire, it will start to kind of shrink up a little bit. So I just use my thumb holding that against the Sharpie. I take my other end of my wire and I just pull it down and bring it around the mandrel and just lay the coils right next to each other. You want them really close to each other so that way when you cut the rings, all the rings are nice and well formed. And then once I get to the end, and as you're kind of coiling it around, the wire does start to harden up a little bit. So it gets harder and harder. But I always like to just try to push that last little tail with my finger just to form it around my mandrel because I like to use every little bit of fine silver I have. Then there's a little bit of space here. I'm just going to squish those guys in a little bit. And then here's my little bit of tail. Like I said, it kind of just cinches up there a little bit. And then I'm just going to squish that guy down there too. When you do choose a mandrel, you really can use anything you like that's going to be for the size of rings you want. The only thing you have to keep in mind is that it has to be something that you can slide your rings off of. And it's also helpful if it's consistent in size. Some people do use like wood dowels and stuff like that, which you can, but if the wood is too soft, it will kind of squish in and your rings may not be all uniform. So I like to stick with something that's a hard plastic or steel or something like that that can make a nice coil. So now that I have got this really nice coil here, I'm going to use the Tronex razor flush cutters to cut some rings. And you want to make sure that you have cutters that do a nice flush cut. You don't want ones that have that are going to leave a little burr because you will not be able to get those to close and fuse those rings. So you want a really nice flush cut. And when you're cutting your ring, you want to use this nice flat side, not this side because that's going to leave a little burr. So you take your cutters and you hold your coil. And this little part here where it's straight, you don't want to cut that because it's not really conforming to the coil shape. So you want to start back at the bend. So I come back here and you want to make sure when you're cutting that it's nice and straight across. You don't want it to be at an angle or anything because then the jump ring won't close properly and you won't be able to fuse it easily. So you go in there, just making sure you're not marring your ring behind there, and then you just cut that down. So we can see here, I've got a nice flat cut on there with no burr. So then I just need a matching cut on the other side of the same ring here. So what you do is you just flip your pliers over, again, always using this side for your nice flush cut, and you do it the opposite way so that you have two flat sides coming together. And you just want to be as close there as possible. And just make sure, again, that your Tronex are nice and straight across there. So see there, we have this ring that's got nice flush cut on both sides, and the burr is on this side here. So that is a nice good ring. We'll just set that aside because I go ahead and I cut all the rings off my coil and then we'll close them all. So seeing how I have this burr here, I've just got to do a little trim to get rid of that. So I just cut a little bit to just get rid of that burr. Again, making sure your pliers are straight across so you get a nice flat cut. Again, using this flat edge here. Cut that. So get rid of your little burr. So now I've got a nice flat edge there. And then I flip it over your pliers using the other side there to trim the other side of the ring. Again, just make sure it's nice and straight across. And then you just trim it. And there you have your second ring that has got really nice straight edges. So you got 2 rings so far. And then you just keep repeating this process. So you always have to trim that burr off. So you just trim that off first. Set that aside. And then flip your pliers around and then trim the other side of that ring. So yeah, nice. Got 3 rings. I should be able to get 1 more out of this coil. So again, just trimming that burr off. And now I'm just going, so now I've got a nice flush cut there, and then I just need a flush cut on the other side. Again, just make sure your pliers are just always straight across. You just want a nice straight cut. Trim that off. So I'm going to set my little tails to the side there. So I've got 4 nice jump rings here. And now these rings are ready to be closed. So normally what I do, because the fine silver is really soft, it's pretty easy just to use your fingers to close them. But you can also use the nylon pliers. You could get one of those and your finger to do it, or you could use 2 of them. Or you can use chain nose plier to close your jump rings. The only thing with a chain nose plier, because this is fine silver, it's very easy to mar it. So just take care and don't be too heavy-handed if you're going to use your chain nose pliers. So I think I'm just going to use the nylon pliers and my finger. And I just kind of work it back and forth, just like you close like a regular jump ring, until you bring those ends together. You just want to make sure it's nice and flush there. And I just kind of a lot of times I'll run my finger over both sides. Just make sure it's not sticking out and there's no burrs. So there, I've got 1 nice closed jump ring, and that guy is ready to be fused. So now I'm just going to go through in the same fashion and close up the rest of my rings. So then I'm ready to fuse them. So you just kind of work it back and forth. And as you can see, this wire is pretty soft. And when you can kind of hear that click in there, that's always a good sound. You know it's nice and it's tight and it's in there. So I've got my second ring and it's ready to go. Just continue that same process. All right. Yeah, nice. All right, and my last one. Just moving it back and forth, just like you would opening and closing a jump ring, and just bring those edges together. This one, though, you can see kind of a little bit, it's sticking up there just a hair. It's like 1 ring's up a little bit more. So to kind of adjust for that, I'm going to take my nylon pliers and very gently, because obviously, as you can see, this wire is really soft, so you don't want to really smush it. I'm just going to bring it in here in the center and just barely squish that down. So it just takes out that bend a little bit. And then I'm just going to try to close it again. And now I don't have that burr, and it's good to go. So I've got 4 rings that are nice and closed and ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my fusing station, and then I'll show you how to fuse these rings. Okay, so I just wanted to go over the features on the torch and just talk a little bit about refueling it here. So you want to make sure that you use triple refined butane when you do fill your torch. And to fill it, you'll take it out of the holder, you will turn it upside down, and there is a pin in here, so that's where you fill it up with the butane. So you take your butane, and you want to make sure that you're going straight up and down, and you just shoot that in there, and it will fill up your torch. When it gets too full, it will start to kind of spit out butane out on the side, and then you'll know that your torch is full. So mine is already full and ready to go. You always want to make sure that you only fill a torch that is cold. Never fill one that has been used or is even just kind of warm. It's very unsafe. And then once you do fill your torch, you just want your torch to sit for just like 20 seconds or so, just to let the butane settle. So we're all filled. We're ready to go. I'm just going to set my butane off here to the side because I am going to turn on my torch. And so to just go over some of the features here, this is a button here that says continuous. So once you have your flame and you push that down, it will let you just hold onto the torch and have a continuous flame without having to pull the plunger back here. And then on this other side is where you can kind of adjust your gas. So say if your flame is not quite the quality that you need, you can adjust your gas ratio here. And then also on this knob here, you can adjust your air ratio. So that will help you kind of get the flame you want. So you just kind of maneuver those as needed to get a nice flame. Again, you always want to make sure that your torch is cold if you're adjusting this, because obviously this is metal here and it's very hot after the torch has been going. So to turn your torch on, you're going to want to, there's a little lever back here. You want to pull that down. So you pull that down and then you hit the plunger. And you might have to do it a couple times until it ignites. So now it's ignited. And as soon as I let off this, it's going to go off. That's why you want this continuous. So you do that again. And then you hit this continuous button. And then that way you have the flame and you can use your torch nice and easily without having to hold down that plunger. And then when you're done, you want to turn it off. You just hit that plunger and then it turns off. And then just replace it back in your holder because that's a safe place to keep, especially a warm torch. Okay, so we're set up here and we're ready to fuse. I just want to talk a little bit about our workstation. You want to start on a surface that's either a stainless steel table or use a piece of metal to cover your table to protect your surface from heat. We have our pumice fire brick here. That's a good conductor of heat. We have our butane torch here, and then this one has a little holder for it, which is nice to kind of keep it upright when we put it back. I have my cooling cup and a pair of tweezers, and I've already put cold water in my cooling cup. So you can either use tweezers, or if you have a pair of old pliers, you can use those too, because you'll use your tweezers to pick up your hot rings and drop them in the cooling cup to quench them. And then kind of off to the side here, I do just have a paper towel. After our rings have cooled, I put them on the towel just to dry them off. So I've got my rings. As you can see, they're already set up here, and I've set them all so that the cut is at 12 o'clock. I like to set them all where the cut is the same, just so as when you're fusing, you kind of know where that's at. And I like to have them spaced out a little bit, but fairly close, because that kind of helps conduct the heat through there. So, and then also too, you want to just make sure that you don't have any loose clothing. I prefer not to wear long sleeves, and I always pull my hair back just to make sure that there's no chance of anything on you catching on fire. So you just want to make sure too, if you have any pets or children, that they're kind of out of the room so that nobody gets in the middle while you're fusing. So to get started, we're going to grab our torch. You want to make sure that you have your torch full. I always refill mine before I start work. That way I know it's cool when I'm filling it. I just fill it with the refined butane, and then you want to let it sit for like 20 seconds to let it settle. So I've got a nice full torch, so I'm getting ready here. So I'm going to go ahead and light it, and then I'll go ahead and we'll fuse these rings here. So I'm just going to turn on my torch here there's a little lever here in the back. You pull that down, starts the gas, kick this, you can hear that, pull it down, and start your ignition. This you can put on, it will hold your flame. And now I'm just going to bring it down and I'm going to start fusing my first ring. And so to do that, I just slowly bring the very tip of that blue flame, because that is a sweet spot. And I just go in a very circular motion here on your ring. And you see as the ring starts to light up like that, it is starting to get nice and hot, and it will get really close to fusing. And there you go. it will quickly change color there, and then it's good to go. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave that there for now, and I'm going to do the rest, and then we'll quench them all at one time. So I'm just going to repeat that same process. And you just want to keep a nice, consistent flame on there, because consistency is what's going to get you to get that ring to fuse. And you'll be able to tell, like here now it's starting to get nice and hot, that nice red, that's what you want. And then you just wait till it starts to get kind of melty, and then you pull away. Because you don't want to overheat it, because it can disintegrate or start to melt down your ring. So you have to be really careful when you're kind of in that little sweet spot there. So I'm just going to do these other ones here. And that's why it's nice too, to make sure, like, cut up a couple rings at a time. So in case one does melt or something goes awry, which it will happen, that you don't, you don't lose the time that you were working on it. So I always like to set up a few at a time. Got that one, and then we're going to do this next one here. It's just about there. All right. So now, obviously, I've used that flame, so this is very hot. You need to be very, very careful. So I'm going to use my tweezers, or again, you could use some old chain nose pliers. Then I just gently grab the ring and then just drop it in there. And you can kind of hear as it quenches all that. I always think that's a rewarding sound when it does that. And I accidentally dropped that one. That's why you want a nice stainless steel surface so that you don't ruin your top here. All right, so now that my rings have been quenched, I'm just going to move my block aside, and I'm going to pull them out. Okay, so we've fused our rings here. So now we have 4 nice rings that are all closed and ready for the next stage. So be sure to check out our next video where I'll show you how to work harden and add texture to your fused rings.